All right, today we've got a 6.0 Power Stroke in here. He's had the turbo replaced a couple of times because it keeps leaking oil. So they brought it to us to see if we can figure it out. We actually do run into this issue a lot, not just on 6.0s, 7.3s, 6.0s, 6.4s, 6.7s. They all have a similar issue. And what we diagnosed it as was a CCV problem. The issue is that the CCV is actually there to release crankcase pressure from the engine, or if you have it hooked up factory, it sucks it out of there, which can help your seals, your oil seals, your turbo seals, and everything. The problem is you modify it from stock, it puts unneeded stress on other seals, and a lot of times it's the turbine piston seal that tends to leak. Now, we have a very simple test that will show you if this is the problem. I'm going to walk you through that today. I'm also going to walk you through some of the things that customers say because they don't want to do the test, but it's a very, very simple test. First of all, when you look at this truck, we get lots of pictures that say, no, it can't be a CCV. I've got my stock intake, and then they pull their oil fill cap and show me there's no blow-by. This is not a blow-by issue, it's a CCV issue. And even though this stock intake looks factory, it is not. It actually has a modified CCV on it. Even to the average eye, when you go and look at it, I've had people send me a picture saying, look, there's the stock CCV hooked up, there's the stock intake hooked up, still having leaking problems. Well, this one actually isn't stock. It'd take you a few minutes looking at it to see, but you can see this hose right here. That's actually where the CCV is going. It comes out and around and into this catch can, and then comes out of the catch can, around, and then back into the air filter. The problem is that's putting unneeded stress on the turbo system. And what that does is causes it to leak out the exhaust. So the problem is when you modify your CCV from stock, it'll often cause it to push oil out the turbine piston seal. We'll do a quick demonstration of what that looks like. I'll probably fast forward it through the boring side. But basically what you're going to see us doing is removing the oil fill cap, and you can watch all the smoke go away. The reason being is when you remove the oil fill cap, it vents the pressure correctly and the turbine piston seal stops leaking. It takes about a minute for all that oil to burn off depending on how long it's been leaking. Sometimes it could take 10 to 15 minutes of heavy driving to burn out all the oil. Because think about it, you've got oil all through your exhaust, in your catalytic converter, it's in your muffler, it's all throughout the exhaust. So the test that we tell people to do is remove your oil fill cap and go beat on the truck for 10 to 15 minutes. Build up some boost, build up some EGTs, push it really hard, see if the smoke goes away. If it does, you have a CCV issue. Now you can see the truck idling here is smoking. This is how it came in. As you're looking at the exhaust, you'll see the smoke is coming out the exhaust. And I'm simply going to remove the oil fill cap and then wait about a minute. Now that it's been about a minute, I'm just going to rev the exhaust just to make sure to burn out any of the excess oil. You can see now that all the oil is burnt out and the exhaust is back to normal. And just to reiterate this point, I'm going to put the oil fill cap back on, and you'll watch the smoke come back. Now that the smoke is back, you can see that there's definitely an issue with this CCV. Now another thing you could do is remove the CCV system that was installed. And I'm simply just going to unplug this hose that's going to the catch can and see if we have the same result. As you can see, after running the truck for a minute, the smoke goes away, and I revved it just to clear out all the exhaust. And if I hook the CCV catch can back up, the smoke comes right back. So this was diagnosed 100% as a CCV issue. Now I know I'm going to get a lot of flack from you forum guys, you Facebook guys saying, well, I've ran a CCV for years without any issues, and that's great. But we spend hours and hours every week on the phone with customers going through the same thing, and they have this problem. Why it affects some people and not others, I don't know. But stock CCVs, when they're actually routed through the stock, don't have a problem as long as the canister on top of the valve cover is not clogged. So that's what we've been recommending. I admit, I've ran CCVs on my truck in the past. I've ran them to the back of the truck with a little filter on it. I've ran them just down below the oil pan. I've ran them to a catch can before. I've ran them to a Venturi mod into the exhaust. And I'll admit, I've had some trucks that had issues and others that don't. But if your turbo is leaking oil, we suggest you start here. Very easy test. Remove the oil fill cap, go for a spirited 10 to 15 minute drive. If the smoke clears up and goes away, you have a CCV problem. I've even had a couple of extreme cases where it blew motors. I actually had a Cummins do it and a Power Stroke do it, where because of their CCV was modified, clogged, or the catch can was clogged, whatever it was just slowly burning oil out the exhaust. But it was enough that in 5,000 miles, the truck got low on oil and it blew the motor. All right, so some guys might want to know, why is this happening? Should your turbine piston seal hold back that pressure? And the answer is no. I had someone just comment to me, well, there's so little blow by, it's such a little amount of pressure, how could that cause it to leak? And I like to relate it to if you took a bottle and sealed it off and stuck an air nozzle up to it, and if you introduce just a little teeny tiny bit of air, over time that bottle would eventually explode. And that's what's happening with your crankcase, is you have your cylinder rings don't go all the way around and you have what's called blow by. It's normal. Every vehicle has it. Some people get worried and defensive and say, well, my truck doesn't have any blow by. Every piston ring has a certain amount of blow by, and that pressure gets down into the crankcase or into the engine, and it's got to get back out. Well, in these trucks, it comes out through the CCV. And if that CCV is at all restricted because you modified it, maybe you put a long hose on it, maybe you added a catch can, maybe you put a filter on there, maybe you ran a 27-foot hose up and around your frame, up and over your axle, around your back bumper, whatever it is, what's happening is it's putting unneeded stress on that system, and the pressure is building up inside the engine, and it's got to find the path of least resistance. I've seen valve covers leak because of it, rear main seals leak because of it, and as a turbo guy, I've seen turbos leak because of it. And the turbine piston seal is just like a cylinder piston seal. It doesn't go all the way around. It has that little teeny tiny gap. What happens is when there's excess pressure in the crankcase, it's going to find the path of least resistance, which is oftentimes the turbine piston seal on the turbo. And what it does is it just drips just a little teeny tiny bit of oil at a time, but eventually gets in that hot turbine housing and it'll start to burn. That's why you see your smoke. A lot of guys will say it only happens after sitting at a stoplight for a few minutes. That's because your turbine housing, when driving, pulling a trailer, accelerating, is often hot enough that burn that oil quick enough that it doesn't build up. But while you're sitting there idling, they said the smoke will come and it'll turn into a thick fog. That's because the oil's leaking fast enough that it's building up in the turbine housing and burning. Also, when your turbo is building up boost and back pressure, it actually pushes back in on those seals because they're pressurized in the turbine housing and in the compressor cover. That boost and back pressure pushes and counteracts against that oil pressure on that little seal. Over time, those seals will often cake up, they'll be filled up with carbon, and we've often seen where old turbos won't leak because they're totally sealed off. That turbine piston seal has closed the gap with carbon. And then you pull your old junky used turbo and put on a brand new turbo, bam, suddenly it's leaking. That's because it's got a nice, fresh, brand new seal and the gap's still there. It hasn't closed up with carbon yet. And that's why people put their stock turbo back on, it doesn't leak. They put their new turbo on and it does leak. Well, it's not a turbo problem, it's a CCV problem. And that's why we recommend, if you're having a problem, just pull the oil fill cap, go for a spirited 10 to 15 minute drive, and if the problem goes away, you know you have a CCV issue.